konverima isuatu kurunjan. An educated, enlightened, and informed population is the one of the serious ways of promoting the health of democracy. With this thought, it's an absolute pleasure to be here to welcome you all in today's event, celebrating the 75th year of people's unity and democracy in Manipur. To start with, I would like to invite Chief Guest of the Day, Shri Rajendra Gautam, former Minister of Social Justice and present MLA of Delhi Legislative Assembly on stage. Next, guest of honor, Shri Hemochandra Singh, former Speaker of Manipur Legislative Assembly on stage. Next, Professor Bimol Akoijam on the stage, please, sir. Dr. Malem, spokesperson, DMCC on the stage, sir. And convener of DMCC, Shri Seram Rojesh on the stage, sir. Now I request Shri Rajendra, Advisor DMCC, to felicitate the Chief Guest of the Day. Shri Seram Rojesh to felicitate Chief Guest Hemochandra, Guest of Honor of the Day. Shri Ratan to felicitate Professor Akoijam Bimol. Shri Nawa to felicitate Dr. Malem Ningthouja. And Shri Premji to felicitate convener Seram Rojesh. This day holds a remarkable significance as Manipur emerged as the first democratic state in the entire Southeast Asia. On 18th of October 1948, the first Legislative Assembly was constituted on the basis of universal adult franchise It was inaugurated in Imphal, Manipur by the then Maharaja of Manipur. And in this time of unprecedented crisis that Manipur is facing, I feel immense pleasure and privilege to honor to be the part of the celebration and affirm the enduring legacy of democracy and the idea of plural and united Manipur. Without any further ado, may I invite Ms. Umang Twinkle to give her welcome address.
Live stream. Are you live streaming?
Yes.
I, on behalf of the Meetei Co-ordinating Committee, would like to extend my welcome address. First of all, I welcome Shri Rajendra Gautam, former Minister for Social Justice, Delhi Legislative Assembly, as a chief guest. Next, I also welcome Shri Hemochandra Singh, former Speaker of Manipur Legislative Assembly, as a guest of honor. Also welcome Dr. Angomcha Bimol Akoijam as a speaker, Dr. Malem Ningthouja, spokesperson of DMCC, Dr. Seram Rojesh, convener of DMCC. Also welcome, thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Twinkle. To continue with our program, we have keynote address by Dr. Malem Ningthouja, spokesperson, DMCC. Dr. Malem is a PhD in history from the University of Delhi, a historian and author of many books and articles. So please give a warm welcome to Dr. Malem.
Greetings. I'm humbled and privileged for having invited to this program organized by Delhi Meetei Co-ordinating Committee. We have resourceful spokespersons and guest of honors. I need not elaborate too much on the topic. Rather, as a spokesperson of the DMCC, I would like to give you a brief historical background with factual information so that it helps you understand some of the important points which has remained quite hiding away from the collective memory. The events that happened in 1948 was largely a fallout of the historical trajectories that have been going on for a long time in the eastern part of India. Let me give you an example. Like, for example, between 1826 to 1891, Manipur was a protectorate state under British without any tributary status. It means we don't pay tribute, whether it was a friendly alliance. From 1891 to 14 August 1947, Manipur became a tributary state under British indirect rule. In between, there was a policy to build up an India manifested in the Act of 1935, and there was a proposal to form Council of India. Manipur State Darbar was quite aware of that and were quite willing to join the Council of India. What was the structure, what would be the structures, and what would be the process was never discussed, but they have expressed the willingness to join Council of India. Between 1938 to 1940, the Darbar again considered to join proposed Federation of India. And then in 1947, April 30, Darbar of Manipur was willing to join India's Constituent Assembly. It was a time when freedom was about to be achieved and there was an attempt to form the Federations of India, or whatever the model it was, and a constitutional assembly Assembly was formed and the Darbar was willing to join the Constituent Assembly. Then on 14th May 1947, Manipur's king wrote letter to Jawaharlal Nehru requesting that a separate representative for Manipur be sent and be allotted a separate state in the Constituent Assembly. This request was turned down by Nehru on 22nd, but at the same time, Manipur was compelled to send an indirect representative. So the Darbar on June 4, 1947 accepted indirect representations to the Constituent Assembly of India. In between, the governor of Assam and the Manipur State Darbar signed an agreement on July 1st, 1947. I will not go into the details of the agreement, but the essence was that Manipur would be joining the proposed formations of an Indian entity. That was the understanding and the agreement. Simultaneously, British have been trying to reform the administrative structures of Manipur for quite a long time. So on the same day when the agreement was signed between Governor of Assam and the Manipur State Darbar, that's on 1st July 1947, rules for the administration of Manipur State was adopted. It abolished the Darbar and the Council of Ministers nominated in consultation with the Governor of Assam was instituted to run the government of Manipur. Secondly, the next day on 2nd July 1947, standstill agreement was signed between Manipur government and the government of India. It was meant, dominant of India, it was meant to retain certain provisions of the concurrent list or whatever arrangement it was, certain provisions and certain clauses which were then continued by the British to be retained. That was the sense of the standstill agreement. Then on July 14, 1947, a person from Tripura called Girishchandra Guha formally represented Manipur, Tripura and Khasi states of groups to the Constituent Assembly of India. In the meantime, Manipur constitution making was in the process. Series of meetings of constituent assemblies were held between March and May 1947. Finally, on July 26, 1947, Manipur State Constitution Act 1947 was adopted. It comes along with Manipur State Hill People's Administrative Regulations, Manipur Courts Act, and Manipur Naturalization Act. In that sense, it completely democratized the administrative and political arrangements of Manipur. Absolute monarchy has to come to an end, and people's democracy has to be established. Finally, there was a very big push by the government of India to incorporate Manipur into its proposed formations of an Indian entity. An instrument of accession was signed on August 8, 1947. It empowered, gave absolute powers to the Indian states particularly on 4 areas. There was defense, then auxiliary, ancillaries, and communications and transport and etc. But that doesn't end. In between the electoral process in Manipur was going on in full swing, and in 1948, Manipur state election rule was adopted. Finally, elections were held in June and July 1948, and Manipur State Assembly was inaugurated on this day, that is 18th October 1948, and there was a big King's proclamation. As I said, let me briefly highlight the essence of the democracy that came into existence in 1948. We can see from it certain things where we can analyze. What was the political status of Manipur when the assembly was inaugurated and democracy was established? There are different views. Some would say that Manipur was still a protectorate state under dominance of India. There was one line of argument. Another line of argument was that Manipur was still a sovereign entity within a bigger confederation called India. Another argument is that Manipur enjoyed limited autonomy within a centralized Indian identity. So like the opinions, differing opinions still continue to exist, but the historical trends, as we could see, the acts and the process and the agreements and the adoptions of different laws would entitle that despite Manipur enjoying a kind of autonomy, still there was an attempt to bring Manipur within a larger geo-territorial entity called India. Now, another essence of the democracy that we could see in 1948, the constitutions and the government that we formed, was that the idea of territory was fully established, that Manipur's territory was defined and it was integral and it was shown to be. And another point is the idea of people came into existence, something that our spokesperson is going to speak about. This idea of people shows that recognition of differences existing among different peoples and limited autonomy of tribes was fully expressed in the manner how the elections was conducted, in the manner how separate regulations was adopted. And the idea also of citizens also emerged quite interestingly, giving them enough constitutional protections for fundamental rights along with duties. And accommodations and absorptions of peoples were to be seen, to be recognized as citizens, to be found expressed in the Manipur Naturalization Act. Another aspect is like the governance. What kind of system that the people at that point of time wish to have? And we could see that peoples were aspiring for representative democracy based on adult franchise, something which was quite unknown and unpracticed in several parts of India and in South and Southeast Asian countries. And in this governance, separations of power between the executive and the judiciary was clearly laid out. Finally, on the questions of security, there was intent and intentions of and policies of policing and militarizations to be seen. What we could see from this perspective was that democracy, however it may be perfect or imperfect, and in historical time, it was founded on the economic premise of a tribal society, semi-feudal society, and plus the evolutions of market capitalism evolving gradually, and the big push by the neoliberal capitalist path is going on. But this dream of democracy is believed to have been shattered after India's takeover of Manipur on 15th October 1949 and devaluing Manipur's status to a completely, abolishing the assembly and then bringing it into direct control of chief commissioner by the Manipur administration order 1949. How it happened, why it happened, what was the fallout is not here to be discussed, but rather we are grateful that the idea of peoples have emerged and was fully exercised through the adult franchise, and Manipur was, despite all the policies of integration, was able to defend its territory and able to express itself as a separate entity either within India or outside India. That's the essence of democracy. And when we organize this program, some people think that it's going to be an anti-India program. No, it's not an anti-India program. And there, the countries will be happy if they still consider Manipur to be a part of India, that we, in these eastern frontiers, happen to be one of the segments where the sense of democracy was fully acknowledged, understood, dreamed, and realized through the adult franchise exercise in 1948. I hope the parameters of this program is set within this framework, and I am hopeful that our key spokesperson will address this issue, the idea of Manipur, people's unity, the idea of territoriality, governance, and respect for human rights and action. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Malem, for throwing light on the historical background of Manipur and the journey of Manipur towards a democratic state. Next, we have Diamond Jubilee Lecture, We the People, a reflection on the trajectory of society and polity in Manipur by Dr. Angomcha Bimol Akoijam, Associate Professor, JNU Delhi. His area of specialization in social and political and cultural studies with specific interest in identity politics and conflict, nation state and minorities and gender relationship, popular culture, cinema and research methodology, politics of knowledge, Some of his significant publications include From Indica to Bharat via India, Manipur, How History Repeats Itself, Economic and Political Weekly. So, may I invite Professor Bimol Akoijam, sir, please.
Diamond Jubilee celebration of the establishment of the first democratically elected legislature in entire South Asia. Some even say including Southeast Asia. There were other assembly elected through elections, but it was not based on universal adult franchise. The case of Manipur was the first in the entire South Asia as well as Southeast Asia, where the assembly was constituted through an election based on universal adult franchise. The election was conducted in June and July, and then the assembly was inaugurated by the Maharaja on the 18th of October 1948. Honorable Shri Rajendra Gautam, my friend, former Speaker of Manipur Legislative Assembly, Shri Hemochandra, Dr. Malem and Dr. Rajesh, and ladies and gentlemen. It's a privilege to share. Actually, I was supposed to be at home today in Manipur to be part of this. There's a personal anecdote behind this event, and I'd like to share this. And I divide my lecture into four aspects or four parts. The first part I will call it the premise of today's lecture, and then the meaning of 18th October, what kind of meaning that should we have, and then I will talk about the context, followed by a lieutenant governor and so on. So practically speaking, I'm just skipping these 3-4 pages with this narrative. What happened was, 1938 onwards, people have been struggling for a democratic form of government against the feudal and monarchical system, and they have achieved. And remember that post-colonial period is supposed to be self-rule, and people's right must be accepted and asserted and celebrated. Unfortunately, the post-colonial period of Indian state experience in Manipur is just a paradoxical tragedy. That government was dismissed and a bureaucratic rule from Delhi was introduced, and Manipur was put under that rule by Delhi for 23 years of this post-colonial period. And that is at the root of Manipur's fragmented ethnic politics and our movement. Even if that merger was done, if the constitution was adopted within a few weeks, 1949, September 21, the agreement was extracted from the Maharaja and it was implemented on 15 October. Interestingly, on 17 October, 2 days afterwards, Article 306, which later on became 370, was introduced for Kashmir. When you deny that Manipur's thing and took over Manipur on 15th of October, and 2 days later in the Constituent Assembly, a special provision was inserted for Jammu and Kashmir. The irony of that one. And then Manipur was kept as its first Chief Commissioner's province, and the Lieutenant Governor and so on for 23 years was ruled by Delhi. And that's what we call it post-colonial rule, where you're supposed to have your own self-rule. My gut feeling as a social science student is, if the government had not done that muscle flexing, even after that incident, if there is a certain sensitivity among the leaders of the new independent India, had they placed Manipur under Group A of the state with the legislative assembly of each one, because Manipur has already had one. So if they had introduced as a Group A state, when the constitution was adopted in November, a few weeks after the merger was done, I do not think that there would have been an armed rebellion in Manipur. That would be very, very unlikely situations. And I believe also that there would be no this ethnicization of politics and fragmentation, because the internal dynamics of common good would have been consolidated much more earlier under that particular experience. But rather than that, what Delhi will see, Delhi will solve us a problem. There's a third party always involved. And that is why, rather than looking at the interdependent nature of the people in the state, we look to Delhi. Remember that. This suspicions and humiliation is recognized publicly by none other than former Home Secretary of the Government of India, Mr. G.K. Pillai. He said that the manner in which Government of India in the post-colonial period have treated Manipur is nothing but humiliation. They have to fight for their statehood. A statehood, the assembly they have already achieved before the constitution of the Indian was adopted. Indian constitution was adopted. And for inclusion of, if it is a separatist, do not do it. This is what his argument is. That inclusion of Manipuri language in the schedule, Manipuris had to fight. By the way, that was the first Indo-Mongoloid linguistic family to be recognized as the part of the Indian constitution. So this series of humiliation has been inflicted on Manipur was acknowledged by none other than Union Home Secretary G.K. Pillai. And so that is the journey how Manipur has been destroyed. And this mistrust, remember that I know there is histories about how people have talked about, what is the relationship between the pan-Indian nationalism and Manipur nationalism. What is the nature of India of 1940s and contemporary India is completely different. That's why I was reminding you that the merger agreement, if you really look at the legal validity, it is already declared as null and void by a conference here. And this is a very, very prescient argument and a very, 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 what should I say, persuasive arguments that some people would, especially Professor Sanajawa, late Sanajawa, is very vocal about his position. So, what is the purpose for remembering this? We need to know that some people will think that remembering 18 October is again a separatist tendency and so on, without realizing the historical context or what was India then and now, and what was the internal dynamics. Remember that when the Nikhil Manipuri Hindu Mahasabha was inaugurated in its first session, there was an opening song. And one of the lines in that song goes like this. It says, Bharat ki mamo asami nuja Akoijam musibi bande Manipur matram. It says, the daughter of Bharat, the new buyer of Assam, my beloved mother, hail to Mother Manipur. So this regional, you call it today, but a nationalist imagination, and many of these entities comes together to form this country, is something that one must appreciate. Manipur was not created by the Indian state, is something that we must remember. It is acknowledged, not by me, by the Constitution of India itself. Because in the Schedule 1 of the Indian Constitution, the one we have today, in Schedule 1, entry number 19, Manipur is defined as Manipur and is defined the territory which was administered as if it were a chief commissioner's province before the commencement of this constitution under the name Manipur. So meaning that Constitution of India is saying that Manipur existed as a geopolitical entity before the commencement of the constitution itself. And what is this chief commissioner's province? It was 15 October 1949. As an implementation of that merger agreement, the chief commissioners was appointed under Act of 1935. Whoever is signed first like this was put as the chief commissioner's province. That was what became Part C group in the new constitution. Chief commissioner's province. Delhi was one of them, by the way, and it's still struggling to have a government of its own. You can see that. So the historical context of how this country comes into being, and the kind of various forces that was operating must be recognized as genuinely as possible. Remember also one interesting fact that we must not forget. Once the Manipuris lost his own assembly, which they achieved after struggling against the feudal and colonial and monarchical structure, which was dismissed unceremoniously following this merger agreement and put under direct Delhi's rule for 23 years. And people of Manipur were wearing Gandhi topis, doing satyagraha, submitting memorandums, demanding what they call it restoration of democracy. That means restoration of an assembly. They've been doing it And they said that you are too small, this is unviable, this has been the excuse of Delhi all along. But suddenly, in response to the Naga nationalist movement, which became violent, they were trying to struggle to control it and so on. So they think that creating a state for the Nagas will solve the problems, at least begin the process. So they created Nagaland out of the then Naga Hill district of Assam, combining with the twin San regions of the then NEFA, which is the Northeastern Frontier Agency, and inaugurated a state called Nagaland right in the next door of Manipur, where Manipur was denied. And interestingly and incidentally, you see that 1963, that particular state was inaugurated in trying to control the armed movement there by the government of India. Next year, the educated youth form a group, a political group called United National Liberation Front, demanding sovereign state, what they call it, restoration of lost sovereignty. That armed movement began in that fashion has something to do with the manner in which the government of India has done. So in conclusion, last part, the significance of remembering is twofold for us. One thing is that in such a small and historically evolved state, an ethno-tribal exclusivity or ethno-nationalist project with its exclusivist sectarian interests cannot be the basis for demanding political rights. In a country like India, which is multicultural, forming community-specific, culture-specific ghettos is against the very spirit of this country. And that is the liberal spirit that Manipur itself had already experienced. As people having rights, different communities coming together and celebrating a modern way of life was imagined and practiced, even though shortly for 11 months. Now today when we remember, it has twofold for us. That one must go beyond our ethnocentric ideas and sectarian interests and demands. One must be able to think about the civic and the common good for the people. And that particular liberal spirit is what remembering 18 October signifies for me. That the we the people, which is the basis of justification for the political entity called Manipur, must be revived and should not be based on ethnic or ethnocentric ideas. It is in this sense that I have said the Meiteis also have to reinvent themselves. They cannot continue to suffer as some people tend to do from what I have been calling imperial nostalgia. One must move beyond that. Similarly, the exclusivist, ethnocentric, tribal exclusivism must not be encouraged. We must try to have a civic, liberal conception where every individual and every community can live with dignity and well-being. And any injustice in that process must be lawfully and institutionally handled rather than taking law into one's own hands. And that must be the spirit and celebration of democracy and the unity of the people implicated in it is what we are memorializing 18 October as an important day. Last but not the least, coming to the present crisis, as I've started with that, you can see that there is an ethnocentric exclusivism which doesn't sync with the ethos of this country as a liberal democracy. Decentralization and participatory democracy is good and we must encourage that. It is good for effective delivery of goods and services and enabling people's participation in the manner in which they are being governed. There is no issue on this line. However, such decentralizations in the name of ethno-tribal exclusivism must not be encouraged, especially when violence has been used as a means to an end, then one must not encourage all the more. Remember that the Meiteis particularly have felt humiliated because you encourage violence and create a state, you deny an assembly which they had already. And today, because there was violence, and if you succumb to pressure of this violence, Indian state is only encouraging violence as a means of running society and polity rather than democratic ideals that was exemplified by 18 October 1948 moment in Nepal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our chief guest, Shri Rajendra Gautam, former Minister for Water, Tourism, Culture, Arts and Languages and present member of Delhi Legislative Assembly for few words.
सभी को नमस्कार, जय भीम। सबसे पहले तो आप सबको आज़ादी की 75वीं वर्षगांठ भारत की भी और मणिपुर की भी, उस पर शुभकामनाएं देता हूं। लेकिन शुभकामनाएं देते हुए मन में सवाल भी उठ रहे हैं कि मैं शुभकामनाएं दूं, कैसे दूं। सरकारें हैं कहां? जो प्रोफेसर बिमोल जी ने पूरा, मैंने लग रहा था जैसे मैं कोई क्लास में बैठा हूं, लेक्चर के माध्यम से पूरा हिस्ट्री मणिपुर का भी और मणिपुर के साथ साथ उस वक्त किस तरह स्टेट्स का मर्जर हुआ भारत में, किस तरह एक्सटेनमेंट एग्रीमेंट और मर्जर एग्रीमेंट्स हुए, जिसमें से कश्मीर ने मर्जर एग्रीमेंट नहीं किया। तो वो इश्यूज आज अलग अलग राज्यों में जहां प्रॉब्लम्स थी, आज वो समस्याएं आज भी सामने हैं। लेकिन दुख इस बात का है, पूरा दोनों साथियों को सुनने के बाद एक बात तो क्लियर हो गई कि मणिपुर में शांति थी, खुशहाली थी और सभी समुदाय के लोग मिलकर रहते थे। इसका मतलब आग मणिपुर के लोगों ने नहीं लगाई। कोई तो है जो यहां से गया और जिसने मणिपुर को नशे के जहर में जला दिया। कोई तो है जिसने जो धार्मिक उन्माद, नफरत देश के अलग अलग हिस्सों में बढ़ा रहा है। सवाल ये नहीं है किस संप्रदाय के लोग मारे गए, सवाल यह है कि मरी इंसानियत है। मानवता के लिए खतरा पैदा हो गया है और उस स्टेट के जलने पर, उस स्टेट में इतने लोग के मरने पर हमारी सरकार कहां है? वो मीडिया जो इजराइल पहुंच गया और पूरे दिन वहां क्या चल रहा है उसका आंखों देखा हाल, आंखों को देखा कुछ नहीं, इजराइल में बैठ के बना रहे। उसका पूरा हाल रोज पूरे दिन टीवी पे चलता है। उसको मैं मीडिया कैसे मान लूं जिसे अपना जलता हुआ देश नजर नहीं आता, जिसे जलता हुआ मणिपुर और मणिपुर के जलते हुए लोग नजर नहीं आते, जिसे मणिपुर के जलने पर देश के प्रधानमंत्री की चुप्पी नजर नहीं आती। मुझे नहीं लगता कि पूरे देश में कहीं भी लोग धर्म के नाम पर या जाति के नाम पर लड़ना चाहते हों। फिर लड़ाई होती क्यों है? ये हत्याएं होती क्यों हैं? अगर इसको समझने का प्रयास करें तो उसके पीछे कहीं ना कहीं राजनीति नजर आएगी। कौन लोग हैं जिन्होंने नशे को आमदनी का एक बड़ा जरिया बना लिया? आखिर असल मुद्दे सामने क्यों नहीं आते? क्योंकि मणिपुर एक रिमोट एरिया समझो, और यहाँ का मेन स्ट्रीम मीडिया ना तो जा रहा है ना कवर कर रहा है, ना ही ये जानने की कोशिश कर रहा है किसने वहां पे नफरत पैदा की, आग किसने लगाई, ना ही वो ये जानने की कोशिश कर रहा है कि ये आग लगने के कारण क्या है, क्योंकि बिना कारण के कभी क्रिया नहीं होती। मणिपुर की जो वीडियो वायरल हुई उसने पूरे देश को, न केवल मणिपुर को बल्कि पूरे देश को, पूरी दुनिया के सामने शर्मसार किया है। ऐसे में मणिपुर में शांति कब लौटेगी? डेमोक्रेसी का ट्रू मीनिंग क्या है? प्रजातंत्र मणिपुर में है ये तो मैं स्वीकार नहीं कर सकता। आज की डेट में वहां कोई प्रजातंत्र नहीं है, आज की डेट में वहां जनता की चुनी हुई कोई सरकार नहीं है। लोगों को छोड़ दिया गया है मरने के लिए, ये बहुत दुखद है। और दूसरा, डेमोक्रेसी का असल मायना वो नहीं है जो इब्राहिम लिंकन की डेफिनेशन को हम लोग बोलते हैं ना, डेमोक्रेसी इज द गवर्नमेंट ऑफ द पीपल, फॉर द पीपल, बाय द पीपल। दैट इज नॉट सफिशिएंट। अगर गवर्नमेंट की अगर डेमोक्रेसी की असल डेफिनेशन को जानना है तो भारत के संविधान के जो प्रियम्बल है एक बार उसको ध्यान से पढ़ लें। फंडामेंटल राइट्स और डायरेक्टिव प्रिंसिपल ऑफ स्टेट पॉलिसी को ध्यान से पढ़ लें तो समझ आएगा एक्चुअल डेमोक्रेसी का मतलब क्या है। देश के संसाधनों में अगर सभी जाति धर्म के लोगों को, सभी लोगों को समान रूप से देश के नेचुरल रिसोर्सेज में हिस्सा ना मिले, कुछ लोग बहुत अमीर हो जाए और कुछ लोग बिल्कुल गरीब रह जाए, कुछ लोग बहुत अच्छे मिशनरी स्कूल्स में, कॉन्वेंट स्कूल में पढ़े, कुछ लोग ऐसे सरकारी स्कूल में जहां पढ़ाने के लिए टीचर भी ना हो वहां पढ़े, कुछ लोगों को यही ना पता हो उनके पास खेत की जमीन कितनी है, कुछ लोगों के पास 1 गज जमीन नहीं है, कुछ लोगों के पास खाने के लिए रोटी नहीं है, रोजगार नहीं है, कुछ लोगों को यही नहीं पता उनके पास धन कितना है। तो फिर ये डेमोक्रेसी तो सच्ची डेमोक्रेसी नहीं हुई। देश कभी नफरत से नहीं चलता, नफरत से नफरत बढ़ती है, जहर से जहर बढ़ता है, प्यार से प्यार बढ़ता है। लेकिन जब सरकारें खुद नफरत फैलाना शुरू कर दे, जब सरकार के मंत्री और सांसद नफरती भाषण देना शुरू कर दे और उन नफरती भाषणों की वजह से दंगे शुरू हो जाए, तो फिर जिम्मेदार कौन है? क्योंकि आज के सब्जेक्ट पे तो ऑलरेडी हमारे स्पीकर्स बहुत अच्छा बोल चुके हैं। प्रोफेसर साहब ने पूरा हिस्ट्री बता दिया, हेमोचंद्रा जी ने दर्द भी बयां कर दिया।
DMCC for giving vote of thanks. Sir, please.
मैं आपको नमस्कार सबको, बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद हमारे सम्मानीय मंत्री, दिल्ली का मंत्री श्री गौतम जी। आज जो 18 अक्टूबर के जो इम्पोर्टेंट जो कंटेंट जो है इसमें मैंने कहना कुछ नहीं है। प्रोफेसर बिमोल, डॉक्टर मालेम एंड डॉक्टर सेराम रोजेश और हमारा सम्मानीय जो मणिपुर का फॉर्मर स्पीकर हेमोचंद्रा, उन्होंने सब कुछ बता चुका है। उनके सामने मेरा कुछ कहना सूरज के सामने या कोई बत्ती दिखाना वो बराबर हो जाएगा। सभी हमारे सामने जो बैठे गेस्ट आज के जो प्रोग्राम पर जो आए हैं, हम DMCC की तरफ से, दिल्ली मीटिंग कोऑर्डिनेटिंग कमेटी की तरफ से आपको धन्यवाद जताते हैं, आपको थैंक यू कहते हैं। और इस प्रोग्राम के बाद जो है हम चाय की जो हमने प्रोग्राम रखे हैं और दूसरा चीज़, देर से आने के लिए बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। हमारा मैडम बनीता IRS इन इनकम टैक्स, कम से कम आपने प्रेजेंस तो दिया, उसके लिए धन्यवाद। थैंक यू वेरी मच। थैंक यू वेरी मच।
Ma'am was very willing to join us from the beginning, but she already had one program before, a very important program. She conveyed it to me. Today, October 18, 2023, beckons us to remember, reinvent, reflect our commitment to the democratic spirit and define Manipur as we the people of Manipur reaffirm to stand united. So I request all the invitees guests to join us for a light refreshment in the canteen area, and thank you once again.
दूसरा चीज़, बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद गौतम जी, जो हमारा जो दिल्ली असेंबली का जो मिनिस्टर जो आए थे। हमें उम्मीद है कि दिल्ली असेंबली में भी हमारे लिए कोई आवाज़ उठाएंगे, हमारे मणिपुर का, हमारा जो मेटई और जो अलग अलग जो कम्युनिटी में जो क्लैश हुआ है, हमारे लिए कोई आवाज़ उठाएंगे, हमें उम्मीद है। धन्यवाद।
And one more photograph with all the participants. Please come here. So it's a historical day for us with the dignitaries. Please, I would like to invite all of you. Please kindly join here so that we can have a group photographs here. Everyone, please come. Me and please, everyone, please come here.
Long time.
Bay về trong cái mấy anh làm cái không ai sẽ nó làm gì không. Come on.